welcome everybody. Just please get settled in. We'll get started in a bit. We're waiting for people to join, and once we have most people, we'll get started. We'll give it another minute and then go. I think we can get started, and I'm sure people will join in as we go. So, all right, welcome everybody. Good evening, good morning from wherever you're joining us. If you are joining us for the first time, Spark is a mentoring initiative where we provide resources on career guidance, further studies, and many peripheral skills development resources. We've hosted several workshops previously in these areas, and you can find all of them for free on our website, www.sparkmentoring.info. We are currently offering 6 programs. Amar, next slide, please. I won't go into too much detail, but you can go to our website and learn more about each of these programs, or follow us on our social media platforms to get timely updates about these programs and how you can enroll in them. And today we will be having a session under our Inspire program, where we showcase stories of alumni from diverse career paths. Our next slide, please. So today we'll have a talk on a day in the life of a management consultant. As an undergrad, I had no idea that such a career path even existed. And to be honest, I probably still don't even know much about it today. So I'm really glad we have Radhika and Shashank here to enlighten us about pursuing a career in management consulting. And I hope you in the audience take full advantage of this session today and get yourselves a step ahead if you're planning to pursue a career in this field. A little bit about our speakers today. Radhika graduated from ICT with BTech in Fibers and Textile Processing Technology in 2013. And from there went to Jamnalal Bajaj Institute of Management Studies to pursue her MBA MMS in 2017 and graduated in 2017. And after that went on to work at Pidilite Industries and gained 2 years of experience as a product specialist there. She now works as an engagement manager at McKinsey & Co. She joined their India office in 2017 and is currently based out of the New Jersey office here in the US. Here she worked across different industries. She focuses on pharma, life sciences, healthcare, and medical devices sector, and largely across business and revenue growth, margin improvement, and new business entry. Our next speaker is Shashank. He graduated also from ICT with BTech in Polymers in 2012 and went on to pursue a Master's of Engineering Management at Dartmouth College in 2015. He is currently a strategy director at EY Parathenon, a strategy consulting firm with a focus on healthcare and life sciences sectors. And he has deep expertise in launching and scaling new businesses, defining growth strategies for established organizations, and driving innovation across startups to Fortune 10 organizations. So welcome, Radhika and Shashank. We're very fortunate to have you and can't wait to hear from you. Before we get started, just some quick housekeeping. If you all have questions, please go to our website, please go to the website www.pigeonhole.at and enter passcode 13NOV21, so 13 November 21. And you can post questions over there. You can also like questions that have already been posted, so they would have the higher chance of getting answered. And we'll definitely address all your questions towards the end of the session. If there are any other issues, please post them in the chat box and one of our team members will try and address it. So you will also see the link in the chat box if this particular slide disappears soon. All right. So without much further ado, I do want to turn it into Radhika and Shashank. Radhika and Shashank, the floors are yours.
Thank you, Anusha, and thanks for the introductions. Can we go to the first slide? So hello, everyone. Super excited to be here and really looking forward to our discussion today. I know Anusha probably took you through this introduction in detail, but maybe I'll spend 30 seconds on this. After graduating from ICT, I worked at Pidilite, did my MBA in JBIMS, and to be very frank with you, that's when I knew what a consulting career looks like. So if you don't know about consulting yet, I was in your shoes like 8 years back when I was doing my undergrad at ICT. Once I knew what consulting was, I was excited about it, applied and got in through an internship in 2016, and then joined as junior associate in the India office. Worked for 2 years in the India office and then transferred to the US office, where I now work as a manager. I won't spend a lot of time on this. We can get through kind of projects that you do as a consultant in a bit. Next slide, please.
Hey everyone, this is Shashank Rao. Amar, if you go to the next slide. Like Radhika and like Anusha said, not to repeat it for the third time, but this definitely makes a point that I had no idea what management consultant, like what that career path is. After graduating in 2012 from Polymers, I took a traditional path, went to Reliance, worked there for 2 years. That's where I met a lot of other people who, just like me, and just like probably some of you, had no idea what to do. They had an expertise in chemical engineering, in polymers, so they took a path that meant that they could use something. So it was more backward looking, like what we had, you use the skill set that you have and use it in Reliance. But then that's where Reliance for the 2 years, that's when some of my like flatmates and others started thinking about what else can we do. So people just went off to start their own companies. Some did MBA. I chose the path of doing an MEM, which is Masters of Engineering Management. This is something one of my seniors in UDCT or ICT did, and I knew of that because of that guy. So I went to Dartmouth College. This MEM program is a mix of engineering. So you use your technical skills, you take courses in whatever technology area you want to. You can do chemical engineering, you can do operations research, you can do statistics. But at the same time, alongside the MBA students, you can take on your business courses like marketing, corporate strategy, communications, finance, what have you. So during those 2 years, I figured out, okay, there's a world of possibilities beyond just chemical engineering that I can do. And one of them, among others, was management consulting. The other one, so I didn't choose management consulting right after MEM, but I knew of it. But I realized that what I was most interested in is identifying like new opportunities for growth for a company, whether that's a big company, that's a small company, developing new products and making sure that the products, you may have heard, some good products never make it to the market because the business model failed. There are so many good examples, like you may know of, what's it called? The supersonic flight. It started off, it was there for a decade. Instead of traveling from New York to London for 8 hours, it cut down the speed in half. Cut down the travel time in half. So you flew within just 4 hours. But after like 10 years of operations in early 2000s, it stopped. Why? Because There was some technical issue, but also because it was too expensive. The business model was not supporting such a strong innovation. So I learned all of that during the college, and I thought, okay, let's understand the strategy. Let's understand the business side of the world and see how we can make great products even greater by making sure the business model supporting it is strong. So that's what I did at United Health Group. Unfortunately, I didn't work on the supersonic plane, but it was more about like making sure that the hospitals, making sure that the nurses, making sure that the system around the healthcare that is provided in the US is strong. So that's what I did for 2 years before moving on to my current job, which is EY Parthenon. Like Anusha said, it's a strategy consulting firm that focuses on all industries. And just like what I did within United Health Group, now I do it for my clients. So EY Parthenon is a service company that deals with a different sets of clients. So I won't spend too much time on that particular job, but if you go to the next slide, I want to introduce what management consulting is. There are a lot of myths or preconceived notions around management consulting, like why does a company pay $2 million for 12 weeks of work for like 10 or 15 pretty slides? There are some other misconceptions, like people like management consultants travel all around the world to fancy places. There are other misconceptions that you work, like my friend Radhika would say, you work 9 to 5, but it's 9 a.m. to 5 a.m. So I don't think I can be, Radhika and I will try to be a little bit practical here, sift through all of that misconceptions, preconceived notions, and break it down for you on what management consulting really is. So I think to start with, and Radhika, feel free to add, it's a service industry. It's a client-driven business. So the best way to understand management consulting is to put yourself in the shoes of your client on the company that you're advising. What kind of questions are you answering for those clients? So like some of them are listed here. How do I improve the profitability of my business? I was giving an example of Reliance Industries. Reliance Industries started off in the textile, moved on to chemical, then it took a whole journey, and now they launched in telecom through Geo and whatnot. They make those decisions either internally or working with consultants in a very analytical way. They look at what is the market size, what is the best use of my money, investing in Geo or investing in a different industry, what is going to get me the most returns. In addition to those financial aspects, you also have other things like what is going to improve the brand value of my company, what is going to improve the public perception of my company. So there are so many decisions, and strategy and management consultants specifically focus on helping clients navigate through those cloud of questions, through those different set of complex issues that they have. Let me pause here, and Radhika, feel free to add something, and then I can also give an example of a case of a project that I worked on.
Yeah, I would just say that think of a management consultant or the whole management career, management consulting arm as advisors to a company. So if there is a question that a company wants to solve, it can be something around, hey, how do I increase my sales, or how do I reduce my costs, or which are the next industries to get into, or which are the industries I am currently present in these 5 industries, which industry should I exit? Any of those questions, think of a consultant as an advisor helping a company make those decisions. And those decisions can be data backed, will most likely be data backed. They will be backed by industry trends. They will be backed by macroeconomic, microeconomic factors. So that's the whole gamut of the management consulting field. The kind of problems that you will solve are so diverse here. So it's really hard to say that you will be doing this specific type of work, but just think of questions that a CEO might have. All of those questions are something that a consulting firm can help advise them on.
Thanks, Radhika. This is, and one of the questions that I keep hearing from someone who doesn't know management consulting is, why can't a company do it themselves, right? Sure, there are certain things that a company can do it themselves, but the value of management consulting or strategy consulting comes from the fact that they are only focused on these type of complex problems day in, day out. Within a company, you have the company to operate, right? You have to manage your production, you have to manage your sales. There are so many things that you're responsible for, but consulting, they're only responsible for all of these complex problems. So they can come in, they can leverage their experience from their past work. They are in the know of what's changing the industry. So that's why I think that's where the consultants provide maximum value. There are other areas, for example, the person that hired you just doesn't have the right team, or they don't just have the right time to devote on this. So that's some other reasons why someone would hire a consultant. But without getting into too much theory, I want to give an example of the kind of project that my company worked on. So there was this, I'm looking at that slide right now. So it's a chocolate manufacturer company that manufactures candies and different types of chocolates and sweets. So they, in the US, they started looking at the trends that people are now starting to eat more healthy food, and there is a new trend. There is a new type of snacks or candies like veggie sticks that they can, that's gaining a lot of traction. So this company started thinking, okay, my sales are now not growing as good as it was growing over the last few years. And they're seeing this new trend of like healthy foods and veggie sticks and whatnot. So they said, okay, let's evaluate this market. I know this company that is doing well with the veggie sticks. Can I just acquire that? So that's the question they posed to us. So like decide whether or not to acquire this veggie sticks. So the first thing you first thing you think about is, what are the areas you would explore to start answering that question? So management consulting is very like analytical. You have to be data driven, like Radhika said. You can't just make a guess. Like you look at this veggie snacks market. What is the size of the market? Like how many units are being sold right now? What is the dollar per unit? So what is the total revenue potential of that whole veggie sticks market? What is the growth rate? How fast is it growing? If it's growing slower than your current business, then it probably doesn't make sense to buy it. What is the differentiation? What kind of like synergies between my company and the new company exists today? Like revenue synergies. Are we using some new, is the acquisition target using some new distribution channels? Like are they selling through different modes that we can just use to sell our current products as well? What are some cost synergies? Can we cut down the two different manufacturing units being used by two companies and instead just produce it from the same manufacturing unit? So you start by answering some of those questions. You look at what competitors exist in their market, in the veggie sticks market. Is it fragmented, meaning are there 10, 20 different companies producing in small amounts, or is it more monopolistic? Is there a one single big manufacturer that's dominating the whole market? Then you also try to understand your customers. Like what kind of customers are they geared towards? Is it more young, healthy, savvy, tech savvy people? Or is it something else? Do they have some, is there certain geographies that they're in? So you start by asking these questions. You list out what kind of areas you want to do research on. And then as a management consultant, you start doing the research. So asking some of these upfront questions is done by like partners, which is the top level in management consulting, senior managers or senior directors, and managers or directors. Once that scope is defined, the scope of what we need to research, then we engage the broader team, which is after undergrad or after MBA, the analysts or associates come in and they help us with the research. So they will do like interviews with people who are in that market today to understand what are the market dynamics. They will conduct, look at all of those companies' public filings that they have to report to the government from a tax perspective. So in those filings, there will be information about research. There will be information about their revenues, their growth targets, etc. So it's a very data-driven project. And once you identify all of those things, you have all of this information, and then you do a brainstorming session with the client saying, hey, this is what we found. This is an attractive market. This will provide a lot of synergies for you, but There's a lot of competition, so you may not want to enter the market. So that kind of information, that kind of working session we do towards the end of the project before we make a decision. So I just give an example. Like Radhika said, this is very different in every different project. So this is just one example. Radhika, would you like to share any examples from your side?
Yeah, I just want to say that, like, I know Shashank gave a very comprehensive example about a chocolate company, but a chocolate company could be, it could also be a pharma company, it could be a soap manufacturer, it could be an automobile company, it could be an oil manufacturer, it could be just about any sector, and the problem statement could be, Shashank gave an example of a new business market entry. It could be something like, how can I increase my sales, or how can I right size my company, or how can I do I go public with this company? What is the valuation of my company? It could be across, think of any sector and any function, and a consulting project can be at the intersection of any of those. Maybe I'll give a simple example. I am a textile engineer, but the first project that I worked on was an insurance player. And the problem statement that we had was, how can this insurance player in India increase their coverage of their life insurance product? And that this kind of project is a sales acceleration sort of project. So maybe just in 30 seconds, what you typically do in such projects is look at their target segments, which are the products that they are currently purchasing. Are they even purchasing any products? If they are not, what are the reasons that they are not purchasing? How can you address those reasons? How can you make sure that your message is reaching the right people? How can you make sure that you're pricing that product correctly? How can you make sure that your product is accessible to people, and that the process of selling it to them is as simple as possible? How do you keep those people engaged to buy other products from your company? So just another example of a project from a completely different field with a completely different objective. So these were just two examples of what a management consulting project can look like. One thing that I do want to highlight is, in this sort of career, you will be able to work across different sectors. So I am a textile engineer, Shashank is a polymer engineer, but we've worked across sectors ranging from automobiles to FMCG to pharma to healthcare to tires and to automobiles and whatnot. So I think this is really a career for someone who's still looking to dip their toes into each of these different sectors to determine, where do I want to then settle down, which sector do I want to work in. So it does provide a pretty wide range of options for people to choose from, which is probably not an option in a lot of other technical roles.
Yeah, thanks, Radhika. Amar, if you go to the next slide, I want to give a sense of management consulting is a very broad term. You have so many different types of cases or projects or problems that clients are. This is probably oversimplifying it, but what we talked about, what Radhika and I gave an example of, was in that first column, strategy and design. That's where you ask, okay, what do we do? So if you think about the what do we do, the why do we do something, those type of questions get answered within the strategy and design type of consulting. So typically it's called strategy consulting. Then you have the implementation. Once you decide the what to do, where to do it, why to do it, the implementation is the how. So for example, if in that candy example, if they decided to go with that acquisition, they will acquire it. Then they will need to integrate the companies, right? They will have to merge their HR systems and IT systems. Those two companies are completely different, how they grew up. So the people, the culture of those two companies are very different. So integrating the culture, making sure the talent, HR policies are similar. So a lot of those, like the implementation of the strategy that was decided, happens in that implementation. And management consultants also help there. Those the strategy projects may be like 8 weeks or 12 weeks long, typically, maybe even shorter. The implementation projects are longer because implementing it, talking to like thousands of people within the organization takes a lot of time. Getting the right technology tools takes a lot of time. So those projects typically range from anywhere from 6 months to a year or even multiple years. Then management services is basically a different type of consulting, but it's almost you loan, like consulting companies loan the people to work as an employee of the company for a certain duration of time. For example, they have a project that's going to go on for 6 months that, hey, I want to install a new manufacturing unit, but I don't have the right chemical engineering experience. So I want to hire this person for 6 months. So that kind of services is like managed services. EY Parthenon or McKinsey will take over that installing of a new manufacturing unit for 6 months or 1 year. They will do it and then turn it back to them. So those are the 3 different types of consulting, management consulting that exist out there. One thing I forgot to add in the previous slide is, like, while we gave examples of that's a typical business, like typical operations of the business. Sometimes there are market-driven activities that trigger some of the issues that the client is facing. COVID is the perfect example, right? So COVID hit. I was working with a healthcare client and they had no idea, like all their patients stopped coming to the hospitals. Everything went virtual. So telehealth, the ability for you to meet your doctor virtually, just took off. This hospital was very like ancient. So they had no technologies. They did not have any telehealth facilities or capabilities. So they had our company to help them understand, okay, what do we do here? Is this a small fad that is going to go away in 12 months, or is it going to stay longer? So those kind of questions help them invest in telehealth technologies. The fact that telehealth is here to stay, and it's not just for 12 months during COVID, made them realize that, okay, we should invest in it. We should hire the right people. Regular doctors will probably need some support from technology savvy people. So they hired some administrative people. It's any market-driven situation or any day-to-day operations might help you, might motivate you to think about some issues with your company. So yeah, that's it from my side. I think we gave, hopefully this gives you a flavor of the kind of work management consultants do and the different type of management consulting jobs that are out there. But I think we want to make it real and help you understand, okay, how do I get into this management consulting job? What kind of interview process looks like? And eventually, I also want to save some time for the questions because we can't expect everything that you're hoping to get out of this session. So Radhika, I'll turn it over to you.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Shashank. Maybe now, Anusha, if we can launch the 2 poll questions, it'll help us, especially in the Q&A round. And then we can talk about what a consulting interview process looks like and what is needed to, what skills are helpful to get in.
Right. You guys see the polls on your screens? Please go ahead and enter your choices.
Surprised so many of you have heard about management consulting.
Yes, I'm very impressed. I did not know about management consulting till I went to business school.
Hopefully, we don't have to clarify that the question meant to be asked before you heard about this. Heard us talk about for the last 30 minutes.
All right, I'm just going to wait for a few more seconds to let this stabilize, and then we'll end the poll. So anyone who's not voted yet, go ahead. All right, ending the poll in 3, 2, 1. So there you go.
Super. So majority of you have heard about management consulting, chemicals, healthcare, largely. where you want to pursue a career? I would have been, to be frank, in that I have no clue. Track it in the second question. I don't know about you, Shashank. Were you super clear that you want to work in any sector?
No, I did chemical. I did my internship in e-commerce. After that, I worked in healthcare. I worked in automobiles. So that's the beauty of consulting. Like, if you know what you want to do, you can definitely do only healthcare or only chemical engineering, even within consulting. But if you have no clue, or if you want to explore different industries, this career path allows you to do that. Over the first 2 or 3 years, you can be a generalist and work across different industries, and then figure out what you want to do, either within consulting or just exit and go to a healthcare company or a chemical company.
Super. Can we go to the next slide? So we spoke about what a career in consulting, or what does a typical project in consulting look like. Let's maybe talk a little bit about how does one get into a consulting company. This is fairly comprehensive, but I just wanted to say at the start that the process of getting into a consulting company, or the whole interview process, is quite different from what you will see in other technical companies. For example, and I can say this very confidently because I interviewed with Pidilite, worked in Pidilite. So that was a particular interview process. And then when I started preparing for my McKinsey interview, that was a completely different preparation process. So I think the first step is just identifying what roles you want to apply for. So it could be, I'm still trying to figure out which sector I want to work in. So that's more of a generalist role. Some people might be like, no, I want to definitely work in the marketing sales side, or I want to work in operations, or I want to work on a solution side. Or, you might already be super clear on what you want to do. So apply for something that resonates with that. And there are two ways. One is, sometimes a consulting company comes to campus, and that's, a more straightforward path. Or sometimes you might need to look at some other potential avenues to apply. So that could be either through your through the website and checking out what roles are available, or asking somebody who works at that company to refer you. So that's coming to the next point, which is the CV drafting and submission. If you see, and I would encourage you, if you're serious or considering a career in consulting, to look at somebody's CV who's from the consulting field. You will see that CV is quite different from what you see when the same person applies to a technical role. It's more, there's a lot of focus on extracurriculars. There's a focus on what have you done outside of academics, because that's an area that consulting companies generally also want to look at. So you draft your CV and you submit your CV via one of these three avenues, which we just spoke about. The next step, and the next two steps, the aptitude test and the interviews, these would be pretty typical to the company that you're applying for. So some companies may have an aptitude test, some may not have one, some may have it as part of the interview. But let me speak from my experience at McKinsey. There was an aptitude test which was across logical reasoning and data interpretation. So think about, I think the easiest correlation here is if you're preparing for an MBA exam, the kind of questions that you will see there are the kind of questions that you will get in this aptitude test. So think about graphs and trying to interpret data from those graphs. Think about logical reasoning. Think about some quick math. So those are the kind of questions that you will see in this aptitude test. It's generally not an elimination sort of round. It's more to understand, where you're at and how much of your aptitude still needs to be tested in the interviews. And the interviews are the next step here. So there will be HR plus case interviews. And I want to spend some time on case interviews because this is very, very typical to consulting companies. You will typically not have case interviews in any of your other technical companies. I know, Rao, you can share, you probably didn't have something like this when you were interviewing for Reliance. I certainly didn't have any case interviews when I was interviewing for Pidilite. But this is very typical to consulting companies. So you will either have a separate HR round and you will have a separate case interview round, or you will have HR and case interview in the same round. But that mix and match depends company to company. But apart from the HR, what happens really in the case interview is the interviewer will pose a very general question to you. So say, for example, there is this FMCG company that's wanting to increase their sales. They'll give you some facts around this hypothetical company and give you some time to prepare, maybe five minutes or so, and you have to come back and take them through your thought process of how you will approach this problem. The focus here is more about how you're thinking about the problem rather than the solution. You will most likely never get to a solution, but what the interviewer is testing is your logical reasoning, how clear you are about the question, and how you would, in a hypothetical case, go about solving it. What is the process that you will follow, not necessarily the answer that you will come to with that process. Now these interviews, and especially the case interview, can be in several formats. They can be one-on-one, the interviewer asking you the case, giving you time to prepare, and then you and the interviewer having a conversation about it. It can be a written case interview, and Shashank, you can maybe speak more to this given that you've been through this sort of process, or it could be a group interview. Typically, these interviews last for about an hour each, with about half the time spent on HR and half the time spent on case interviews. Just keep in mind that your results from the aptitude test will determine how math intensive or not intensive your interviews will be. Once your interviews happen, so typically you will have some interviews that are conducted by manager level folks, and then some interviews conducted by partners. So think of it as VP or president equivalent people or CEO equivalent people who are conducting your second round of or second stage of interviews. And after that, you will typically get an offer letter. Now, the way consulting typically works in India is either you will have, if you're joining at an undergrad stage, if you're joining after undergrad, you will likely join as a business analyst. If you're joining after postgrad or mostly an MBA, you will be joining as a junior associate. I will pause here. Shashank, anything to add here?
No, I think that was very comprehensive, Radhika. This is, I'll just repeat that this is very different than your other interviews, especially in a technical role. But what other companies have started to do is, if you're applying for a product management job or a sales job, they also started to incorporate some of these case interviews in their interview process. So especially, I think that's the case in the US. Even in India, they started doing right now. So case interview, preparing for case interviews is a must-have, I think, if you're trying for a non-technical role. I'll give an example from not an example, but the group interview. Teaming and the way you interact with different people on the team is a very critical part of the job in consulting. So that's why a lot of these companies introduce this group interview. You might have heard about group discussions if you're going for a grad school, or if you have looked at what MBA recruiting process looks like, or MBA entrance process looks like. It's similar to that, but instead they will give you a case, like I gave an example of the veggie snacks company, right? They'll give a problem, and then the interviewers will go, I guess virtually, they'll go on mute and off video, but if you're in person, they'll sit there and observe the group of 4 or 5 people discussing that, brainstorming it, and they observe them for about 25 minutes. They have 25 to 30 minutes to prepare, discuss, and present a 5-minute presentation at the end. So at the end, the 5 minutes, the teams present their rationale, and the interviewers act as a client and ask questions. So it's a very interactive way of gauging how, one, people work in a group, how they brainstorm together, and then how they are able to listen to other people's feedback and improve on it and not dominate the whole conversation, or how people are engaging as opposed to just sitting back and letting other people do the work. So those kind of qualities come out during those group interview stages. I'll add one more thing. The interview process is very different. So these are this is a comprehensive list, and there might be some new things that kept on adding every new year. But the interview process after undergrad is different, after MBA is different, There are two other routes of getting into consulting. One is in the US, there's a program called Advanced Degree Program. So if you're not doing an MBA, but you're doing a master's or you're doing a PhD, a lot of people are getting recruited from those routes as well. They have a different path within consulting. The fourth path into consulting is as an experienced hire, which is how I got into consulting. So I was in a strategy group working in the industry, but then I came into consulting as an experienced hire. So those are the four different ways you can get in. Getting through undergrad or MBA is your highest probability, I would say. Getting through an advanced degree or as a experienced hire typically happens. So I guess experienced hire typically happens at a higher level. You can't get in at the entry level roles through that.
Yep, and if you look at consulting companies in India, majority of the hires are right out of campus, either out of undergrad campus or out of B school campus. So yeah, just keep that in mind. If you want to get into consulting, probably your highest chances are right out of college. Next slide,
I'll also
please.
share a link.
Oh, sorry.
Oh, while you present that, I'll also share a link of a starting point for you to look at what case interviews or what it looks like. So just look at the website, look at that guy's video on YouTube, and you'll get a feel of what the case process looks like. And this is just one of thousands of resources that are available. But I would do some due diligence, some research into what case interview is. Even the behavioral questions are slightly different. It's not the typical technical behavioral HR round. It's more about they put you in situations. They ask you, tell me about a time when you faced a conflict. Tell me about a time when you worked good on a deadline. All of those answers, you can't just ramble. You have to be structured. You have to describe the situation. You have to describe the task that you were given. You have to describe what action you have taken, and then you have to show the results. So it's a STAR format: situation, task, action, and result. And there are different acronyms and different structures. So as long as you're structured in your answering, that'll work in your favor.
Yeah, and I just want to share maybe one or two questions that I was asked in my HR rounds, and you can see how they are different from what any other company would ask. The question I was asked once was, have you had any conflicts in your family and how did you resolve them? And for me to be like almost the youngest person in my family at that time, I hadn't seen a lot of conflicts. So I really had to think about, what kind of conflicts were there, which I was a part of, and how was I, a 22, 23-year-old, how did I help really resolve those conflicts and come to a solution? Some other questions that I was asked is, how do you, if I were to hire you, what salary should I hire you at, and explain why? So I had to give each of my skills a monetary value and explain why, this is how it adds up, and this is why I think you should pay me so and so. So a lot of questions that will, it's pretty impossible to prepare every possible question on what can be asked in your consulting interview, but you just have to be really thoughtful and know yourself really well to be able to answer such kind of questions. Maybe we can spend just a couple of minutes talking about what skills are helpful to have a career in consulting. And I can maybe bucket these into 3 areas. The first one, I think probably the most important, is conceptual thinking. And this is especially important because as consultants, you will very, very likely work in sectors that you have no educational background in. For example, I work a lot in pharma. Shashank also works a lot in the healthcare sort of space. Neither of us has formal education in that space. We've worked across other sectors like chemical, like insurance, like automobiles. I have background in textile. Shashank has background in polymers. So there's really no intersection and no way we could have known about these sectors. But as a consultant, you will need to have the ability or the confidence to work on these sectors, to quickly ramp up on basics of these sectors, and be willing to work outside of your comfort zone. Just an example of a problem that I helped solve was identifying the size of the of the EV market, the automobile EV market in India in 2030. So very conceptual, very very outside in thinking. So these will be the kind of problems you will solve. So you just have to be open to working outside of where you have your formal education in. The second skill, I would say, I would probably bucket point number 2 and 3 here is data analysis and impact-oriented problem solving. Data analysis is largely, looking at large sets of data and making sense of those large sets of data, identifying trends, identifying insights, identifying things that the data doesn't shout out to you. For example, say, let me take the example of maybe an FMCG company in India. Maybe let's talk about HUL. It's probably the largest. Suppose I look at the data of Hindustan Unilever, probably for their largest brand, let's say Surf Excel, and I look at their sales data for Maharashtra. I want to be able to identify which are the cities that have been ordering the most of their products, which are the cities that have been buying their high value products. So, Surf Excel Extreme, or some of the Surf Excels that are some of the detergents that are higher priced, which of them are going to what kind of shops, how much are there, how much is going to Kirana shops, how much is going to a DMart, how much is going via e-commerce. All of those trends will help you understand a lot more about the market than talking to individual folks. So you should be able to look at those large sets of data to identify trends and use those trends and those insights to inform your recommendations. The second bucket, so I would say 2B, is just impact-oriented problem solving. And here it's really, since each problem is so unique, there's going to be a very different process to solve each of those. So there's no set process to solve each of them. It's going to be a very tailored process to solve each of those problems. But here it's really focused on impact rather than over investing and trying to sharpen your process or trying to sharpen your approach. You will have to very quickly determine an approach, probably determine a couple of approaches and identify which is the approach that you want to solve. But the focus is really on getting to the solution as quick as possible rather than trying to spend time in sharpening your process. The third area is prioritizing high value areas. So, and this is typically called the 80-20 rule. And what it means that 80% of your impact comes from 20% of the problem. So think of maybe the same example, Hindustan Unilever. There will be some products that contribute to, there will be a very limited number of products that will contribute to majority of the sales. So these are your high sale products. So any plan that you're making for across the organization, you will probably want to look at these products first, and probably only these products, because that's where majority of your impact is going to come from. There'll be a lot of smaller products that go into select geographies, which will not be as important to look at. But it will be important for you to identify those high priority areas and work on those first before you look at, the smaller products or the smaller areas. The last skill, I would say, and probably the most important, and something that people who come from a typical engineering background need to work on the most. I certainly had to work most on this particular skill, is just your communication skills. I think as consultants, you will be working with the C-suite, so CEO, CXO, CPO, CFO. So these sort of folks, you will need to be able to really invest in how to best communicate with them. How do I share my message in 2 minutes, in 5 bullet points, rather than taking them through, you've worked a lot, so you probably want to share all of the amazing work you've done, but how do you communicate that very crisply, very concisely to these super senior level folks? I think that's one skill that you develop pretty early on in consulting, and given your exposure and your the face time that you get with C-suite folks, this is probably one of also the largest learnings from consulting. Shashank, anything to add here?
No, I think that's pretty comprehensive. I will say that we probably have 11 minutes and we can open up and try to answer some of the questions that folks have.
Yeah.
So Amar and Anusha, what do you think?
Yeah, sounds good. So yeah, just a reminder for everyone, You can use www.pigeonhole.at and then go in and post your questions. Use the passcode 13 NOV21, or you can even use this QR code to directly get there. While we gather some questions in a minute or so, I just wanted to thank Shashank and Radhika for that wonderful overview of a day in the life of a management consultant. Uh, I think that with that single slider on what is management consultant was really effective, at least for me, in terms of giving a glimpse of what this world looks like. I've had several conversations with Shashank offline, asking those precise questions. So I think this really was good. Things like how the world of consulting is very data driven. Things like what does it involve? So, interviewing people at the client's end to actually understand what the problem is. Your slides were, of course, very comprehensive and razor sharp focus. So I believe that is one of the reasons you have paid so well. I also like this section on how does one even get into a consulting company, and I believe that is a question that most participants had, which is why they are here. Things like how a CV is different than what it would be for some other position, emphasizing on case interviews and how you prepare for that. The last thing I wanted to highlight on is what you brought up during the group interview piece. It is really, I think, an underrated skill, how well you work with other people and how you communicate. This is something at least I did not appreciate as much when I was in my undergrad, but I do much more when I'm working in a corporate setting. So it really makes a huge difference to your overall conduct and how you go about your profession. So yeah, I think with that we can transition to the Q&A. We actually have a lot of questions. Can you all see my screen with the questions? All right.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe we'll start with the one that has the highest votes, and then we can come back to the screen and I'll let you both also pick questions if any of these interest you or if you think they're more important to be addressed. So we'll start with this one by Om. Do management consultants work with governments to solve public problems? So I believe Om says he's heard about McKinsey working with the government of India. What are your thoughts on that?
100%. Governments work with consulting firms all the time, not just in India, even in the US. For one example is I know specifically McKinsey worked with the Maharashtra government to ramp up the distribution of COVID vaccines very recently. And it could be, so that's just one example. That there are also problems around, especially in the US, how do I make public education better for the whole company? What sort of federal funding should I give to education? How do I make sure there is racial equality in certain parts of the US? So consulting companies work with governments all the time across different problems. So what you've heard about, especially McKinsey working with governments is correct. And they work with like all sorts of consultants.
Shashank, anything to add, or we can move forward?
No, I think that's accurate. Vaccine distribution is the best example of what happened during COVID, and a very recent example. Another cases would be like the defense budget. These companies are being engaged just to understand what other countries are doing and how can we best position our defense over the next 10 years according to that. So it's a very, a lot of controversial as well as some straightforward engagements on the government side.
I was thinking of taking this question also because it's voted well, and also I think this is a question even I have for you both. How is the work-life balance in management consulting? You hear about people pulling off like 14-hour days. How true is that?
I won't disagree with that. I think it is,
Yeah.
But it's not every day. It's like a sine wave. It goes up and down. It's mostly up, I would say, but it's just because, like Radhika said, right, you have so many different industries that you switch between projects, so many different types of problems you solve between projects. You personally want to learn more about it. So that is one factor of why the hours are generally longer. The other factor is also the deadline. You have a large team working on it with a limited budget. So you can't work for like 6 weeks or 10 weeks or 4 months. You have a very limited time frame. And as consultants, you are very analytical. You work plan every hour of your day, not every hour, I think that might be over exaggerating, but you work plan every day in those 6 weeks or 8 weeks that you're engaged with. So you have deadlines that you have to work against. So that also drives some of the, I think, working hours. But I've had in between projects 2 weeks or 3 weeks where I was not working on a project, but instead I was helping build some thought leadership or some articles. So that time it was very chill. I could, yeah, I mean, I won't go on public record saying anything, but connect with me offline and I can give you more details.
Yeah, I just want to add, it's definitely not a 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. job. So if that's your expectation, that's not consulting. I do want to add, there's a lot beyond. Obviously, like the timing aspect is one thing. Typically in management consulting, you're also required to be, I mean, I know things have changed post-COVID, but at least pre-COVID, you would typically be working alongside the client in whichever city they are in. So for example, I was based out of the Mumbai office, but there was one client that was in Delhi. So I was traveling to Delhi every week, Monday to Friday, staying at Delhi, working with the client in Delhi and flying back home on Friday. In the US, it's a bit different. It's Monday to Thursday. India is also likely transitioning to a Monday to Thursday system, but typically you will take a flight Monday morning, come back either Thursday night or Friday night. Friday is a bit, it's a bit relaxed, and Saturday, Sundays are off. So it's always a 2-day weekend in management consulting, which is probably not the case in some industries. It certainly wasn't at Pidilite. I only had alternate weekends off.
All right, thank you for that. Any other questions stand out to you? I think we've answered this one.
I think question number, can one do part-time work for consulting? Very, very unlikely. I don't know, Shashank, are there? I know there are, for example, there are programs where, once you join, you can go into party, you can do like 3 days, 3.5 days out of the week of work, but typically you join and then those options are available to you. Unless you're like a super specialist in your field and the consulting company really wants to hire you for a specific skill set, it's quite rare. It's generally a full-time offer.
But how about freelancers?
Yeah, you don't do that.
Is that common?
Yeah.
So there are contractors that company will that say an EY or a McKinsey or a BCG Bain will hire, but those contractors are also working full-time. It's not freelancing sort of work. It's still, they're just not on the company's payroll. They're working as a contractor, and they're probably hired for a particular project. So I mean, 2 ways to look at part-time. One is like limited hours every day, or limited period of time that they are working on full-time. So the latter is probably a more common option than the first one.
So I've heard of go ahead, Shashank, and then I'll add my thought.
I would just say, at the entry level, there is almost no way you can work part-time, especially as an employee of the company. At a senior level, like if you have 10, 15 years of industry experience, and if the company is doing a project in like some sort of polymer engineering type of stuff. So if I had that kind of experience, McKinsey or Parthenon would contact me and like have me talk about that for 2 hours a week or something like that. But no, there's no part-time in consulting.
So I've heard of bridge programs, right? At least for the advanced degree route. I think the big companies like BCG and all have these programs where you can go in for, I guess, a month or 2 and partly experience what it is like for management consulting, and you're still in your degree program. You don't have to have completed your degree program. Any options like that available in India? Any options like that available for undergraduate folks that they want to try out over a summer or something?
I think the summer internships are largely a B school option. So between your first and second year of business school, there's a compulsory internship that you have to do, and that can be a consulting internship. Typically for undergrad, there are no formal programs. One can always apply offline and check with that company if there is a 2-month, a 3-month internship that they can be part of, but there's no formal internship for undergrads. For B school, internship is also like the largest way to get a job. So you'll do an internship, and if you do well in the internship, you'll get a full-time offer, which is why that internship is so popular at business school level. But at the undergrad level, it's largely just joining full-time after your interviews.
Different in the US. I think there are some internships at undergrad in the US, but
yeah,
probably not
in the
relevant for
US,
this
it's
audience.
a bit different. Yeah, in India, the kind of so the campuses that people typically hire from will largely have in the final year, they will have the interview process and you just have the offer after that.
Sounds good. So we are at time with that. I think we can end the Q&A, but we will have an informal town hall soon after we end the session formally. So rest assured, all your questions will be answered. You can unmute yourself and talk to the speakers directly. So before we close, I just wanted to share with you that we do have our last session for 2021. It's under our Achieve program and focused on how to write an executive business case in line with our session today on consultancy. So that'll be on the 4th of December. And if you're following us on social media, you will hear more about the time and when and how you can register. So yeah, with that, I would like to thank Radhika and Shashank for their time and insights on what a management consultant does. Really appreciate you going through this thorough overview of your work life. I also wanted to thank the Spark Mentoring team and the ICT social media team. Like always, there's a lot of effort that goes behind the scenes putting these sessions together. We would really appreciate if you share feedback for the session. So you'll see the link in the chat window. It would help our speakers as well to know how they did and how it impacted your life. You can go to our website, www.sparkmentoring.info, to learn more about our other programs, or you can always write to us on our email address for any questions and feedback. So yeah, with that, thank you everyone and see you next time.
Thank you, Amar. Thanks, Anusha, for organizing this. I really wish I had a chat that focused on consulting when I was an undergrad. At least I would have known what this field is like.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it was great. Actually, before everybody starts leaving, I do want to say that you do have the option to unmute yourself and ask any questions that you might want to ask. I'm going to